Shalom, everybody. This is going to be a bit of an experiment tonight because I am doing simultaneous broadcasts on Facebook, YouTube, and my Discord channel. So hopefully they all go well. Hopefully it's not, uh, a bummer on the Wi-Fi speed or anything like that. I'm not trying to lift too much weight here. So we'll see how it goes tonight. But anyways, we're going to be not concluding, well, maybe concluding, but continuing my my reading of Giants in America. Most specifically, let me take you to the book here. Now, we sell this in the store. This is Giants in America, Newspapers of Our Realm, Volume 1. Why do I call it Volume 1? Because this is a series that I hope to produce. I have part 2. I've already started to collect newspaper clippings of kind of cryptozoology, or cryptids, whatever you want to call them, through the 1800s, 1900s. There's strange creatures that have cropped up in American lore through the years. And but anyways, we're going to be looking at giants tonight. Now, I did part 1 about 3 weeks ago, and then last week I was talking about this through my last tour portions. I took my first ever family vacation. Like, we did the family vacation. You get up at 6 a.m. and you're going till you drop at nights, and you're like, why am I doing this with my life, type thing. But no, it was a great time. And we went to Washington, D.C., which is appropriate for this because I talked about the Smithsonian in here. We went to Washington, D.C. because the Smithsonian is free indoctrination, or I should say indoctrination is free. And the trip was very affordable. And I loved going through the Smithsonian. I gave a presentation on some of the stuff I kind of looked at a couple nights ago. I'm not going to go over it again. However, I do want to point this out. This is a mastodon. And why am I showing you this? Well, if you recall in the first video, it's like I don't know, the first 40 pages or so of the book, we were looking at these this giant that was going around, and these bones that were dug up. It was like, I think like was it 18 or 19 footer? And you had all these doctors and other professionals saying this was a genuine human giant, bone. And it was getting a little too real because all these people were coming in, hundreds, thousands of people were paying to see it, and it was making the rounds. They had to put an end to it. And so they, rolled out the right people saying, no, hold on. This was misidentified as a mammoth or a mastodon, something like that. And so, of course, at that point, they took the bones away so nobody could see it. Nobody could challenge that view at that point. And I think they were just gaslighting everybody. And it's like, well, wait a second here. If it was a mastodon, then fine. They misclassified it. Whoop-de-doo. Happens a lot. It was their mistake. Just show the mastodon, right? Instead of having it stand straight up, just position it correctly. Now, when I went to the Smithsonian, the one thing I would say that genuinely upset me, there was, tons of indoctrination there. I'm cool with all that. I was loving it all. I was enjoying it. I mean, I'll take every single artifact, whether it's Archie Bunker's chair or, Mr. Rogers' sweater, or, the Apollo 11 capsule, or was it the Apollo 15 through 17 moon rover, whatever, Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. I'll look at all of it. Just show the fossils. Show it to me. I'll take everything on a case-by-case basis. The necklace that Napoleon gave his wife, or Marie Antoinette's earrings, all that kind of stuff. And I'll say, okay, all right. Now, we have these physical objects before us, and I know this exists. I know this chair that they're saying is Archie Bunker's chair exists. And I know these shoes that they're saying is Mr. Rogers' shoes are before me. But, does history line up with what they're saying? Got it? Well, what was upsetting me about the mastodon right before you, this very one right before you, this is the only thing that upset me in the whole Smithsonian, is I'm looking at this up close and I'm going, how in the world would anybody dig this up and misidentify it as a giant human? No, a giant, fine, but a human, mind you. I mean, you look at this. There's no fingers. There's like it's just the whole thing, like, that doesn't look like a human rib cage. It doesn't look like a human anything. I've heard, I get the whole thing about when I was a child, I collected zoo books. I have it behind me. I should have pulled it out and shown you the famous elephant issue where they show you that, mankind, they only believed in Cyclops in the past because they dug up elephant skulls and they didn't know what they were looking at, and so they just thought it was a Cyclops. Well, here's the thing. Nobody was calling this quote unquote mastodon a Cyclops. You would look at that skull and go, that's a Cyclops. They weren't saying that. So hopefully you get my point here that I'm calling BS on the whole thing. I think it was a genuine giant. And I think that they had to, pull it away, do damage control, gaslight everybody. Well, let's get right into it tonight. I was trying to remember where we ended up. And I think it was somewhere right about here. Page 42. Hope you all are doing well tonight. I think I need a little more coffee. Excuse me. I wasn't ready to go quite yet. Gigantic skeletons from the Australia Times, September 5th, 1884. As a reminder, the way this works, all these newspaper clippings that were collected, is that some are repetitive. It'll be the same giant that multiple newspapers will be talking about. Those serve two different purposes. Well, multiple purposes, but two of them that I can think of right off the bat is that one is that you will see additional detail, which is really important. It's not just necessarily the same thing repeatedly. You do get additional detail. You see how the story develops over the months as it comes out, and then they try to take it down. But also, I think one of the things that was really a little bit surprising for me through this process was today, journalism is awful. I mean, and nowadays it's so bad. They don't even write stories anymore for the most part. They just do like bullet points, because that's all most people have the time for, or that's the reading comprehension. And so, but I was really surprised to see how many of these that were just copied and pasted even back then in the 1800s. They were just taking one newspaper clipping, copying and pasting it, putting onto another, claiming it as their own. They weren't even sourcing the other newspaper, which is what happens today, of course, too. A Michigan paper reports the discovery of a gigantic human in a rock near the South Rapids. It says the head is massive, 31.5 inches in circumference, is low in the front and very flat on the top. The femur measures 26.25 inches and the fibula 26.5 inches, while the body is equally long in proportion. From the crown of the head to the sole of the foot, the length is 10 feet, 9.5 inches. The measure around the chest is 59.5 inches. This giant must have weighed at least 900 pounds when covered with a reasonable amount of flesh. Yeah, this is where we ended last week. The petrified remains, and there is nothing left but the naked bones, now weigh 304 pounds. The thumb and fingers of the left hand and the left foot from the ankle to the toes are gone, but all the other parts are perfect. Verily, there were giants in those days. Skeleton 7 feet long, New York Times, May 5th, 1885. Cinnaburg, Ohio. Licking County has been for years a favorite field for students of Indian history. Last week, a small mound near Homer was opened by some schoolboys. Today, further search was made, and several feet below the surface of the earth, in a large vault with stone floor and bar covering, were found four huge skeletons, the three being over 7 feet in length and the other a full 8 feet. The skeletons lay with their feet to the east on a bed of charcoal in which were numerous burned bones. About the neck of the largest skeleton was a lot of stone beads. The grave contained about 30 stone vessels and implements, the most striking being a curiously wrought pipe. It is said to be the only engraved stone pipe ever found. A stone kettle, holding about a gallon in which was a residue of saline matter, bears evidence of much skill. Their bows, a number of arrows, stone hatchets, and a stone knife are among the implements that were found at the site. Giants found on the New York-Pennsylvania state line, Philadelphia Times, June 27th, 1885. Why, this man was 10 or 12 feet high. Thunder and lightning, exclaimed Mr. Porter in astonishment. The first speaker, who has won a local distinction as a scientist, reiterating his assertion. J.H. Porter has a farm near northeast, not many miles from where the Lakeshore Railroad crosses the New York state boundary line. Early this week, some workmen in Mr. Porter's employ came upon the entrance to a cave, and on entering it found heaps of human bones within. Many skeletons were complete, and specimens of the find were brought out and exhibited to the naturalist and archaeologist of the neighborhood. They informed the wondering bystanders that the remains were unmistakably those of giants. The entire village of Northeast was aroused by the discovery, and today hundreds of people from the city took advantage of their holiday to visit the scene. It was first conjectured that the remains were those of soldiers killed in battle with the Indians that abounded in the vicinity during the last century. But the size of the skulls and the length of the leg bones dispelled that theory. So far, about 150 giant skeletons of powerful proportions have been exhumed, and indications point to a second cave eastward, which may probably contain as many more. Scientists who have exhumed skeletons and made careful measurements of the bones say that they are the remains of a race of gigantic creatures, compared with which our tallest men would appear pygmies. There are no arrowheads, stone hatchets, or other implements of war with the bodies. Some of the bones are on exhibition at the various stores. One is as thick as a good-sized bucket. So they don't tell you here. Here's what they do tell you. They tell you that there were about 150 giant skeletons discovered. And then they start out saying that one of them was anywhere from 10 to 12 feet high. We don't know how many were 10 to 12 feet high. So there's that. Nevertheless, they do seem to imply that overall, the bones of these men were so gigantic that modern man would appear as pygmies. And I mean, that's twice my height, man. That's pretty tall, 12 feet. So where did all these bones go? Where did they go? They tell us at the time it was written that they were stored in, they were put in different stores, right? Which would make sense. You know, you go to the grocery store to look at the bones and you buy some groceries while you're there. Monster Skulls and Bones. The New York Times, April 5th, 1886. Lou White, good to see you. Thank you for dropping by. Monster Skulls and Bones, the New York Times, April 5th, 1886, says this: Cartersville, Georgia, April 4th. The water has receded from the Tumlin Mound field and has left uncovered acres of skulls and bones. Some of these are gigantic. If the whole frame is in proportion to two thigh bones that were found, the owners must have stood 14 feet high. Many curious ornaments of shell, brass, and stone have been found. Some of the bodies were buried in small vaults built of stones. The whole makes a mine of archaeological wealth. And a representative of the Smithsonian Institution is here investigating the curious relics. Not good. I still can't get used to Smithsonian Institution, as you guys know. For me, it was always the Smithsonian Institute. It is what it is. That's the reality we live in. So I guess there's that. Ohio accounts of 9-foot giants. Stevens Point Daily Journal, May 1st, 1886. It is very evident that at an early day in the history of this country, this section of Ohio was an important camping ground for the American Indian. And indeed, discoveries are frequently made which lead people interested in the matter of prehistoric America to believe that a race of mankind superior in size, strength, and intelligence to the common red man of the forest flourished not only along the coast, east and south, but right here in southern Ohio. There are in this country several burying grounds, and two of them are located 5 miles west of this city, near Jasper. One on the farm of Mr. William Bush and one on Mr. Matthew Mark's farm. In a conversation with a gentleman who has seen skeletons unearthed at the Mark Bank, we were told that many dozens of human skeletons have been exhumed since the bank was first opened. Some of these skeletons have been measured, and the largest have been found to be 9 feet long and over. At one time, 10 skeletons were exhumed, They had been buried in a circle, standing in an erect position, and were in a comparatively well-preserved condition. One remarkable fact about all the skeletons unearthed at these places is the perfect state of preservation in which their teeth are found to be. Not a decayed tooth has been discovered. And this would seem to indicate that these people naturally had excellent teeth or some extraordinary manner of preserving them. They probably ate pretty well too. That would help. Probably didn't have sugar in their diet. The giant skeleton found in Petersburg, Kentucky, Wisconsin Daily Northwestern, July 8th, 1886. By the way, if anyone here lives around any of these locations, I know there's a lot of people in the Midwest who listens. Write in the comment section where you live, and go check some of these places out. I know that these are 150 years old at this point, but I would assume that the mounds might still exist. There'd be record of them, and you could at least maybe check out that in the story. At Petersburg, Kentucky, 25 miles below here, an excavation for a new building has brought to light a peculiar find. It being a strange-looking Indian grave, the receptacle of which has been made of stone and clay, formed into a kind of cement about 3 feet in height and fully 9 feet in length. Within the rude vault lay a giant human skeleton that measured 7 feet 2 inches in length. These bones were all of large proportions, and the monstrous skull, with teeth perfect and intact, was more than half an inch thick at the base. A number of copper pieces, evidently worn for ornaments, a stone pipe, and a quantity of arrowheads were found with the decaying bones. A legged discover of the body of a giant Ashburton, or this would be the Ashburton Guardia. So, a leg discover of the body of a giant, November 1887. The Oil City Cemetery is responsible for the following. While William Thompson, assisted by Robert R. Smith, was engaged in making an excavation near the house of the former, about a half a mile north of West Hickory, preparatory to erecting a derrick, they exhumed an enormous helmet of iron which was corroded with rust. Further digging brought to a light sword which measured 9 feet in length. Curiosity incited them to enlarge the hole, and after a little time they discovered the bones of 2 enormous feet. Following up the lead they had so unexpectedly struck, in few hours' time they had unearthed a well-preserved skeleton of an enormous giant, belonged to a species of the human family which probably inhabited this and or other parts of the world at the time of which the Bible speaks when it says, "And there were giants in those days." The helmet is said to be in the shape of those found among the ruins of Nineveh. Well, that's interesting. The bones of the skeleton are remarkably white. The teeth are all in their places, and all of them are double and of extraordinary size. These relics have been taken to Tionesta, where they are visited by large numbers of people daily. When his giantship was in the flesh, he must have stood 18 feet in his stockings. These remarkable relics will be forwarded to New York early next week. I'm sure he was a mastodon that's carried around that sword and all that stuff. The joints of the skeleton are now being glued together. These remains were found 12 feet below the surface of a mound which had been thrown up probably centuries ago, and which was not more than 3 feet above the level of the ground around it. Here's another nut for antiquarians to crack. Scientists in Texas searching for fossils, traces of a giant race. This is the Fort Worth Daily Gazette, December 31st, 1887. Special to the Gazette, El Paso, Texas, December 30th. W.B. McDowell of San Francisco and Dr. Jacob Wortman of Washington City. Representatives of Hemingway's Southwestern Archaeological Expedition, who, under the guidance of Lieutenant Cushing, have been prosecuting archaeological researchers among the Zuni and Pueblo Indians in Arizona. How this is wordy, isn't it? Where they have partially explored the ruins of a city that now lies beneath the sands of a desert, arrived in the city today. Mr. McDowell is an attaché of the San Francisco Examiner and is a son of General McDowell of Bull Run fame. Well, how exciting is that? Dr. Wertman, pathologist and comparative anatomist of the United States Army Medical Museum, has been detailed by the Surgeon General to assist in preserving skeletons, etc., and to pass upon all questions of paleontology that may arise. He is the author of several important publications on paleontology and comparative anatomy, and is making a representative collection of fossils for the Army Medical Museum to be studied there with regard to their physical characteristics. These gentlemen left last evening for Carrizo Station in the lower part of this country, where a discovery has been made of fossil remains of a human being of giant stature. The skull is about the size of an ordinary human skull, but the jawbone is twice the ordinary size, and the vertebrae are also extremely large. They were discovered in a natural tunnel or a cave in Diablo Mountain, 700 feet above the level of the plain. Bone needles 6 inches long, fragments of pottery, and cooking utensils were also found. This is the first systematic archaeological expedition in the United States, and these gentlemen think from discoveries already made that subsequent explorers will develop the fact that all the valleys of the South have been densely populated by people who have mysteriously disappeared. Indiana Giants found bones of an Indian giant, Cincinnati commercial, October 7th, 1888. As member of the Logan Grays, the crack military organization of Logan Sport that held its encampment this year at Eagle Lake near Warsaw, stopped in the city on his way home from camp and told the following story of the discovery by the party of a cavern on an island in Eagle Lake. A.M. Jones rode to a small island near the southwest corner of the lake and began digging for worms. That's how so many of these stories begin, don't they? He turned over a large flat stone near a tree, and under it was a small hole, which was an entrance to a cave. Jones called the boys up, and we began an exploration of the cavern, which proved to be 25 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 8 feet deep. The walls are of a natural formation of stone, branching out at the middle so as to form 2 rooms. In the front room was the skeleton of a man 6 feet 9 inches long. The bones were very large, indicating great strength. Along one side of the cave runs a small stream of water as pure as crystal. In the front of it forms a small pool. In this were a number of bones. Old settlers in this vicinity of the lake claim that the skeleton is that of Eagle Onki. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Eagle, I know the eagle, but Eagle Onki, the giant Indian chief who lived alone on this island and mysteriously disappeared during a severe winter. The island was known after this chief and was once known as Giant's Island. A prehistoric baseball bat. Gigantic skeletons and other wonders discovered by an excited fancy. Connecticut Daily Republican, July 8th, 1889. St. Paul, July 8th. Every resident of Montana and many visitors to the famous territory know that the Belt Mountains have always been the seat of mysterious stories, and that in their numerous gulches and canyons have been picked up wonderful relics. Among the most curious are agitized human maxillaries and teeth, all of gigantic size. Gold in quantities have been found in the Belt Mountains, and rubies, sapphires, and even diamonds are shown as product of one or the other portions of the territory. The Helena correspondent of the Pioneer Press sends a remarkable story accompanied by numerous attestations to its truth. A gold hunter said that while prospecting in the Belt Mountains, he found a peculiar depression in the ground. After excavating, he discovered a mysterious cavern reached by 23 steps. "At the foot of the stairs," said he, "on one side of the passage lay the skeleton of a man of immense stature. The skeleton measured exactly 9 feet 6 inches in height. The skull lay a few inches from the trunk, and between the two lay 27 nuggets. They were strung on a fine gold wire and ranged from 1 ounce to 10 in weight. Around the thigh, arm, and shin bones were other strings of nuggets, none of which weighed more than 4 ounces. There were about 15 pieces of gold in the pile. They were of many different shapes. None of them weighed over 3 ounces, and each piece had a hole through the center. On each side of the skull, I found some sort of precious stones. They lay in a tiny golden basket and were evidently worn in the ears. I do not know what name to give them, but I believe they are rubies. Beside the trunk of the skeleton, I found a copper axe with an edge harder and keener than any steel instrument of the kind I have ever seen. On the opposite side was a club made of the same metal as the axe. It was shaped not unlike a baseball bat. Under the trunk was a gold plate 10 inches long, 6 inches wide, and 1/8 of an inch thick. It was covered with strange devices. A little further on lay another skeleton, that of a woman. I picked up a string of nuggets near this skull also. They were perfectly round and exactly the same size. They weighed about 3 ounces apiece. Every now and then I came to other skeletons, and although by nearly very one of them I found necklaces, yet strange to say, they were of round copper balls. The catacombs, as I have named this passage, are about 300 feet long, 14 feet wide, and 30 high, and seem to have been cut out of the solid rock. At the end of the gallery is a room 60 feet square and 40 high. In the center of this room stands a block of granite about 12 feet square and 4 feet high. It seems as though the rock had been hewn out around it. It is perfectly square, and it is exactly the same distance from the walls of the roof on every side. There are steps cut in the rock leading to the top of the hall. On the top stands another block of granite, 10 feet long, 4 wide, and 3 high. This is hollowed out in the shape of a human form. I lay down in this, and though I am not a small man by any means, yet the mold was much too large for me. Around the room are scattered vessels of clay, some of which will hold 25 gallons. They are light, yet tougher than wrought iron. I tried to break one of them by dashing it against the granite flooring of the room. Why would he do that? I could not even scratch it. Altogether, I gathered up 500 ounces of gold in the underground passage. I mean, you go to, like, an ancient ruins. It's just, why are you going to try to break something? I'm glad he didn't break it. With that, I need a little bit more coffee. Hold on a second. Hopefully you guys are having a good night. It's going well for you. Gigantic man buried next to ferocious panther. Cincinnati Commercial Gazette, September 26, 1889. Soon after the 1st of March, relics were collected to be placed on loan to the Smithsonian Institution at Washington, D.C. Let me grumble under my breath as I drink some coffee. During the last 2 months, 11 mounds have been opened and their contents taken to the museum and placed on exhibition. These mounds vary in height from 8 to 30 feet, are generally conical in shape, and contain all the way from 300 to 10,000 square yards of dirt. They were built by the Aborigines of this country hundreds of years ago to serve as burial places for the distinguished dead. They are generally placed near some stream in a valley and not infrequently on high points of land, which command a good view of the country, but the larger ones are in the valleys. These mounds are usually composed of clay, sometimes of sand, and often have layers of charcoal or burnt clay in them. These layers are often as brightly colored as if they had been painted. About 5 feet above this layer, or 9 feet from the summit of the mound, was a skeleton of a very large individual who had buried by the side of it the bones of a panther. Whether the person had killed the panther and it was buried with him as an honor, or whether the panther had killed the individual, one cannot say. And then it says 43 mounds opened. This much, however, can be said, that in 43 mounds open, no find of this nature has been made. It is therefore quite interesting and important. The skull of this panther was very large, teeth very long and sharp. It would take a mound builder of a great deal of nerve to attack a beast of this size if he had nothing but a stone hatchet and a bow and arrows to defend himself with. And then it says regular skeleton found next to giant. Just below the skeleton and lying on the layer of buried bones was a medium-sized personage who had buried around his neck in the manner of a necklace, placed his upper and lower jaw, 147 bone and shell beads. The shell beads were made from the thick part of conch and pyrula shells. These shells must have been carried from the Atlantic Ocean, as they are ocean shells and not found inland, or the tribe to which the man belonged may have traded with tribes near the ocean and thereby got the beads. Okay, that's cute. They're trying to figure out where the necklace came from. Ohio Mound Relics, gigantic man buried alongside a colossal panther. Cuba Patriot, October 10th, 1889. Let's see if we can learn anything new from this. Soon after the 1st of March, I left for southern Ohio to collect relics to be placed on loan exhibition in the Smithsonian Institution at Washington. During the last 2 months, 11 mounds have been opened and their contents taken to the museum and placed on exhibition. These mounds vary in height from 8 to 30 feet, are generally conical in shape, and contain all the way from 300 to 10,000 square yards of dirt. They were built by the Aborigines, copy and paste stuff, of this country hundreds of years ago to serve as burial places for the distinguished dead. They are generally placed near some stream in a valley and not infrequently on high points of land. When they say Aborigines twice in a story, it's like, okay, all right, I see how you're just lifting sentences here, which command a good view of the country, but the larger ones are in the valleys. These mounds are usually composed of clay, sometimes of sand, and often have layers of charcoal or burnt clay in them. These layers are often as brightly colored as if they had been painted. Let me see. Let me just skip this. I think it's the same thing. Yep, and then he talks about how they traded to get the beads. Okay, nothing new to that story. A Race of Indian Giants, the New York Times, February 9th, 1890. I'm saving you the time. I guess I could have read it. You could have taken a bathroom break. Mays Landing, New Jersey, February 8th. For over a week, past crowds have been flocking to the site of the unearthed Indian graveyard near Edgewater Avenue in Pleasantville. The first lot of skeletons unearthed was about 1,000 yards from the city post office and embraced 8 bodies, closely laid together in a deep chamber, snugly packed and with tortoise, oyster, and clam shells. One of this number had bead and shell decorations, which together with its extreme height points to those facts that it must have been the powerful old chief, let's see if I can pronounce this, the powerful old chief, Kiniwaga. That's the best I can do, whose descendants still own farms along the shore. Professor C.H. Farrell of Baltimore, Charles K. Simpson of New York, John H. Cooley Jr. of New Haven, Connecticut, and several gentlemen from the University of Pennsylvania immediately went to the scene. Messrs. Risley and Farr, they just kind of cut their names in half there, the owners of the land, gave to the Archaeological Association of the University of Pennsylvania the right to search for relics on their land. These researchers have been watched by thousands of people with great interest. Besides weapons of war, savage ornamental war decorations, and numerous valuable shells, stones, and etc., over 50 skeletons have been exhumed. Dr. Charles R. Abbott, curator of the association, is continuing the search, and the skeletons are to be shipped to the university at once. They run in size from a small child to several of 7 feet in height, and one, supposed to be an old medicine man, Walneck, must have been at least 8 feet in height. About 50 students were on the ground this morning and continued their search until stopped by rain. The citizens gaze in silent wonder on these relics of a race that at one time ruled the land. For 7 miles along the shore can be seen large mounds of clam and oyster shells left here by Indians who used to congregate by hundreds to open oysters for winter food, and it is near these shell mounds that the great number of skeletons have been taken up. In some instances, weapons of war made of stone and flint have been found lying close beside some exceedingly large skeletons. The relics will be put on exhibition at the Museum of the University in Philadelphia. A prehistoric giant, the Popular Science News, August 1890. The legends of all races tell of a time when mankind were of giant stature, doubtless arising in many cases from the discovery of the fossil bones of ancient animals of large size, such as the elephant, mammoth, etc. But as far as we know, there is no proof whatever that the human race was ever possessed of a greater average stature than at present. Of course, this would be the popular science news, right? It fits the clothing. In fact, the tendency seems to be in the opposite direction. The men of the present time slightly exceeding their ancestors in size. This is 1890s, right? So I think when we started this out, like Charles Darwin wasn't around, but now everyone is going the evolutionary route. And, they're saying how we went from hobbits, up, we just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So therefore, the idea of giant humans cannot be true. A result doubtless due to the improved conditions of existence in these later dates. Occasional instances of unusual stature are, however, not uncommon and can be seen in almost any dime museum, and that there were giants even in the Stone Age seems to be proved by a discovery made near Montpellier in France by M. Lapuge and communicated by him to La Nature. At Castle Now, near the above town, is a prehistoric cemetery dating from the ages of polished stone and bronze. A large number of human bones were found, including about 40 skulls, one of which formerly belonged to an individual about 18 years old, who, judging from the size of his skull, must have been over 6 feet in height. But the most remarkable finds of M. Lapuge were 3 pieces of bone illustrated in the engraving, which must formerly have belonged to some prehistoric giant of extraordinary size. The first piece, shown on the left of the engraving, is a part of a femur or thigh bone, and the one on the right a part of a tibia or shin bone. In the middle is represented a humerus or bone of the upper arm from the same ancient cemetery, but of normal size. At the bottom is represented a small fragment, which, here's a picture here, which may either be either a piece of a femur or a humerus. If the later, then it must also have formerly made up part of the skeleton of the giant, as can be seen by comparison with the normal humerus above it. If we judge of the heights of this Neolithic giant by the usual proportions of the parts of the skeleton to each other, he must have been between 10 and 11 feet high. The question remains whether this excessive growth was a normal one or due to a disease condition resulting in a general hypertrophy of the osseous system. On this point, the authorities differ. One professor at the University of Montpellier holding that the bones are normal in every respect, while another finds evidence of a diseased condition. In either case, the giants must have been a source of wonder, if not of terror, to the savage men of those times, and was doubtless treated with all the honor which in these modern days is bestowed upon a successful prize fighter. Now, if he's diseased, you're not going to be a prize fighter, right? It's just not going to happen. There has been an old tradition among the peasants of the vicinity that a cavern in the valley was, in olden times, occupied by a giant. And it would be curious if the discovery of M. Lapuge should show it to be founded on fact and handed down from father to son during the centuries that have elapsed since the time when the ancient inhabitants of France knew of no other material for their implements and utensils than the stones which they so laboriously worked into the desired shapes. Archaeological Notes, the American Antiquarian, June 1891. A valuable archaeological find in an Arizona age. And then, letter in the Philadelphia Times. While removing earth for the foundation of the new hotel to be erected by Harmon and Brooks of this city, and this city would be, again, Philadelphia, I suppose, there was discovered what seems to be the tomb of a king, though of what people it would doubtless puzzle an antiquarian to say. The workmen had penetrated at some 8 feet below the surface of the ground what they took to be stone of a soft, friable nature, but which was evidently masonry of superior workmanship when they reached the tomb itself. This was composed of large square blocks of stone, which was identified as red or rose granite, and cemented together with such skill as to at first cause the whole measuring 12 by 15 feet to appear as a solid mass. The opening of this, while very difficult, as the use of powder was prohibited by Mr. Hendrickson, who, as a learned archaeologist, was placed in charge of the exhuming by the authorities, was accomplished by night. When the interest and curiosity of the party was so great, the work was continued by lamplight till dawn. The tomb, when opened, was found to contain a gigantic image of a man lying at full length and made of clay mixed with a sort of preparation which gives it a bright blue color and a slight elasticity, the whole appearing to have been subject to great heat. The image represents the naked figure, except for a very tight girdle about the waist, a pair of close fitting sandals, and a crown on the head shaped very much like a bishop's mitre, but topped with the head of a hawk or eagle. The features are roughly molded, are of an imperious cast, and of a man in middle age, with a prominent nose and a very large mouth, but with cheekbones so low as to preclude all idea that the original could have been an Indian. The hands, which are as small as a woman's and bear on the backs the head of the bird, as on the crown, are crossed on the breast and hold an image about 3 inches long of a squatting figure, probably that of a god. The feet are also crossed, the right presenting the peculiarity of possessing a sixth toe, which the sandals cut to bring into prominence, as if the owner had prided himself on it. The hair of the image is dressed in thick curls on both sides of the head, reaching to the shoulders and brought down to the brows over the forehead. Careful examination of this clay figure revealed that it was merely the elaborate coffin of the real body and could be opened from the back. This was done with all possible care so as not to disturb the remains within, but a few handsful of dust, dark brown and almost impalpable powder is all that was left of the body. The crown, however, together with the girdle, the image of the god, and a large battle axe with a blade of sharp glass or obsidian and a handle of petrified wood were found in the coffin. The crown is of thick red gold, carved with minute but well executed drawings representing battle scenes, triumphal marches, and other pictures, the meaning of which is somewhat misty, but in all the principal figure is that of a man with 6 toes on his right foot. The workmanship of the whole crown is very fine, and the bird's head on top is a masterpiece worthy of Cellini. It holds in its mouth a magnificent, was that a chow cuties? I don't even know what that is, or green diamond. I don't even know what it is. Sorry, guys. A green diamond valued by the Aztecs, which shows some attempts at lapidification. The girdle found is composed of plates of gold arranged by scales and very thin, so as to give with every movement of the wearer's body. On each of these plates, which is in, where was I? Just totally lost my place. Oh, on each of these plates, which is in shape a half ellipse, is engraved a figure of hieroglyphics conveying, however, no hints of their meaning in their form. The image of what is presumably a god is made of clay combined with the preparation spoken of before and also burnt until thoroughly hardened. It represents a male being seated on a pedestal in a squatting posture, its eyes squinting and grinning in hideous mirth, while both hands are placed over the ears as if to shut out sound. A peculiar thing about this image is that its hair is represented as hanging down its back in one long plait like a Chinaman's. That is interesting. The figure is hollow, but contained only a half a dozen small black pebbles, highly polished, and a somewhat larger stone of a dull gray hue. The coffin and these relics are now on exhibition at the courthouse and are to be donated to the State Museum of History and Archaeology at Tucson. No clue of any value as to what race the remains are to be ascribed can be found, but it is probable that it was one antedating the Aztlan and even the mound builders, and superior to both in knowledge of masonry, sculpture, and the working of metal. Petrified giant, discovery of a body with legs 8 feet in length. St. Paul Daily Globe, February 24th, 1891. Helena, Montana. I was going to say Mount, but I'm guessing that's Montana. Helena, Montana, February 23rd. Vital Jarcots, a half-breed who carries mail between Fort McGinnis and Rocky Point, brings the news of a discovery of the petrified remains of a giant in the Badlands of Chatu country, a few miles below the mouth of the Muscle Shell River. The discovery was made by Latadona, another half-breed, who started off to find a purchaser for his curiosity before... Another half-breed, huh? Wow, okay. Either we're in Lord of the Rings or there's something going on here. Who started off to find a purchaser for his curiosity before Jarcot could get a complete description. The remains were not complete, showing the petrification had only taken place in a portion of the body, while the remainder had followed the course of nature and returned to dust. One leg was 8 feet long, the high being about 4 feet. A rib found measured 2 1/2 feet. Petrification is no unusual thing in the Badlands of Montana and the Dakotas. Wood in that state is frequently found. The petrified body of an Indian was found in North Dakota about a year ago. Jarcot, who brings the story, was perfectly sober. Apparently, he was half-breed, too. All right. Mr. Jefferson's Cyclops. A giant skeleton unearthed at Buzzards Bay, the New York Times, July 5th, 1891. Buzzards Bay, Massachusetts, July 4th. Joseph Jefferson, the actor, has made an astonishing find on the summer place which he has purchased here near that of ex-President Cleveland. I'm seeing some fish swim in the same circle here, but let's just go with this. In laying out the grounds and making alterations, it became necessary to remove a sandhill of large size. The workmen, while doing this, found the skeleton of a man that filled them with astonishment from its great size. An attempt was made to lift up the skeleton. It crumbled away, all except the skull. A workman lay down by the side of it, however, and it was estimated that it must have belonged to a man at least 6 feet 5 or 6 inches in height. The most peculiar thing was brought to light, however, when the skull was taken to Mr. Jefferson and by him examined. It was like ordinary skulls, only larger, except that it had, so far as could be seen, no place where the eyes had been. There was one hole in the center of the forehead that may have once served for one eye. Now, keep in mind, now we'll see where this goes. I actually don't remember where this one goes. Is this, a little baby elephant or what? Or is it really a Cyclops? But keep in mind the original mastodon skeleton that we went through story after story within the last episode of this. Nobody ever said it had one eye. All right. Nobody. That was just not there. Anyways, this led Mr. Jefferson to believe that he had perhaps discovered the skeleton of a Cyclops. He said to Mr. Booth, who was paying him a visit, when he saw the wonderful skull, that he and his brother actor had a chance at hand to play Hamlet with a skull such as it had never been played with before. I'm seeing I'm sorry, this story just not panning out for me. All the scientific gentlemen in the neighborhood have been unable to give an explanation of the skull, as were Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Booth. Mr. Jefferson will no doubt be grateful to receive suggestions from men of science that may throw light on the matter. Just seems like they're just pranksters. That's what it feels like here. The whole thing, fell apart except for the skull, and they just have the skull, and it happens to be a Cyclops skull, which they're going to play Hamlet with on stage. Actors. Yeah, funny. I get jokes. All right. A giant skeleton found in Utah, New York Sun, August 27th, 1891. I told you when we go through this, we go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. The gigantic skeleton of a man measuring 8 feet 6 inches in height was found near the Jordan River just outside Salt Lake City last week. The find was made by a workman who was digging an irrigation ditch. The skull was uncovered at a depth of 8 feet from the surface of the ground, and the skeleton was standing bolt upright. The workman had to dig down 9 feet in order to exhume it. The bones were much decayed and crumbled at the slightest touch. They were put together with great care, and the skeleton was found to measure 8 feet 6 inches in height. The skull measured 11 inches in diameter and the feet 19 inches long. A copper chain to which was attached 3 medallions covered with curious hieroglyphics was found around the neck of the skeleton, and near it were found a stone hammer, some pieces of pottery, an arrowhead, and some copper medals. Archaeologists believe that the original owner of the skeleton belonged to the race of mound builders. Perfect giant skeleton found, Hawkeye, September 1st, 1891. No little excitement has been occasioned by the discovery on a farm near Carthage of several skeletons in a mound that are doubtless those of prehistoric people. In regard to this historic find, the Carthage Republican newspaper will publish the following. The Sweeney Farm Mounds, located near the south line of the farm quarter on Section 5, Carthage Township, have been a familiar landmark to the oldest citizens since, and the quarter was entered by Samuels in 1836 or thereabouts. Last Saturday afternoon, the new owner of the Sweeney Farm Indian Mounds was plowing on one of his mounds when he hit a series of sandstone blocks. On the removal of several sandstone rocks embedded in the ground, the owner, Mr. Phil, procured a spade and proceeded to dig out the rocks with some difficulty. On the removal of these rocks, there was revealed an almost perfect skeleton of a man of very large size. The authorities of Carthage College have secured permission to investigate the find to its fullest extent, and Reverend Dr. Stephen D. Peets has been notified. You got to notify the Reverend, I guess. World's Fair dig leads to giant monarch. Gigantic. We haven't gotten up to the Chicago World Fair, have we yet? That was 1893, I believe. 1893, right? Yeah, Chicago World Fair. This is November 21st, 1891. Gigantic skeleton, evidently of a prehistoric monarch, exhumed in Ohio. In Chillicothe, or just in Ohio, Warren K. Moorhead and Dr. Cresson, who have been prosecuting excavations here for the past 2 months in the interest of the World's Fair, have just made one of the richest finds of the century in the way of prehistoric man. Okay, this right here has my totally suspect. Let's keep reading this. I mean, you're getting ready. You're promoting the World Fair, right? The World Fair is coming, and this is Ohio. Those gentlemen have confined their excavation to the Hopewell Farm, 7 miles from here, upon which are located some 20-odd Indian mounds. On Saturday, they were at work on a mound 500 feet long, 200 feet wide, and 28 feet high. At the depth of 14 feet near the center of the mound, they exhumed the massive skeleton of a man encased in copper armor. The head was covered in an oval-shaped copper cap. The jaws had copper moldings. The arms were dressed in copper, while copper plates covered the chest and stomach and on each side of the head. On protruding sticks were wooden antlers ornamented with copper. The mouth was stuffed with genuine pearls of immense size, but much decayed. Around the neck was a necklace of bear's teeth set with pearls. At the side of the male skeleton was also found a female skeleton, the two being supposed to be man and wife. Mr. Moorhead and Mr. Cresson believe they have at last found the king of the mound builders. We're not given we're not given really a height on this. We don't really know how big these guys were. They were just found at the depth of 14 feet. Wait, the mound itself, 20 feet high. Okay, we're not given a height. There were giants in those days. The Arizona Republican, February 27th, 1892. So, okay, let me just go back to this. So, I mean, right here, the World's Fair dig leads to giant monarch. So, is that a play on words? Or are they saying that, because they call him the king of the mound builders? So there's a lot of mounds. Was he a giant? I don't know. But it does seem like they were promoting the World Fair. Maybe it wasn't as big of a find as they were making out. I don't really know. It was cute, right? Husband and wife together. There were giants in those days. The Arizona Republican, February 27th, 1892, Wheeling, West Virginia, while digging a grave on Trace Fork Lincoln County a few days ago, the bones of a human being of gigantic stature and proportions were exhumed. The skeleton is in a good state of preservation, and the outlines of the frame sufficiently defined to determine that the stature of the person must have been 9 or 10 feet. The skull and other bones are also indicate prodigious size. No one now living has any knowledge of the grave or its occupant, and all indications point to its belonging to some prehistoric race of giants contemporary with mastodons, fossil remains of which have been found in many parts of the country. Hundreds of burials, Chicago Tribune 1892. Near Carthage, Illinois, about 1 year ago, a mound was plowed up, and the bones, principally the skulls of human beings, were found in sufficient quantities to warrant the conclusion that hundreds of people had been buried there. From measurements taken of some of the skulls and principal bones, it was decided that the persons buried were of a race of giants. Some of the femur bones measured 19 1/4 inches, and the measurement of the skulls and other bones indicated that these people must have attained an average of 7 to 8 feet in height. Come on the World Fair here. August 23rd, 1892. 2 giant human skeletons found. The Pittsburgh Dispatch. Again, 1892. Beaver Falls, August 22nd. Workmen, while digging a ditch from the new shovel works to the river of Alquippa today, unearthed the remains of 2 skeletons. They are of gigantic size and are supposed to be the remains of 2 Indians. They have been in the ground for many years, as the larger bones and skull only remain. 9-foot mummy discovered in Pennsylvania burial mound, the Sun, December 8th, 1893. Dr. W.J. Holland, curator of the Carnegie Museum, Pittsburgh, and his assistant, Dr. Peterson, a few days ago opened up a mound of the ancient race that inhabited this section and secured the skeleton of a man who, when in the flesh, was between 8 and 9 feet in height, says a Greensburg, Pennsylvania dispatch to the Philadelphia Inquirer. This mound, which was originally about 100 feet longer and more than 12 feet high, has been somewhat worn down by time. It is on the J.R. Sechrist Farm in South Huntington Township. This farm has been in the Sechrist name for more than a century. The most interesting feature in the recent excavation was the mummified torso of the human body, which the experts figured was laid to rest at least 400 years ago. Portions of the bones dug up and the bones in the legs, Professor Peterson declares, are those of a person between 8 and 9 feet in height. The scientists figure that this skeleton was the framework of a person of the prehistoric race that inhabited this section before the American Indians. Ooh, you're not supposed to say that anymore. You can't say it anymore. The torso and the portions of the big skeleton were shipped to the Carnegie Museum. Doctors Holland and Peterson supervised the exploration on the Sechrist mound with the greatest of care. The curators believe the man whose skeleton they secured belonged to the mound builders class. Giants of other days, recent discoveries near Serpent Mound, Ohio. Oh, this should be good. The New York Times, March 5th, 1894. I'm sorry, this is like so choppy for you right now. My mouse is just going crazy. From the Indianapolis Journal. Farmer Warren Cohen of Hillsboro, Ohio, while fox hunting, recently discovered several ancient graves. They were situated upon a high point of land in Highland County, Ohio, about a mile from the famous Serpent Mound, where Professor Putnam of Harvard made interesting discoveries. As soon as the weather permitted, Cohen excavated several of these graves. The graves were made of large limestone slabs, 2.5 to 3 feet in length and a foot wide. These were set on edge about a foot apart. Similar slabs covered the graves. A single one, somewhat larger, was at the head and another at the foot. The top of the grave was 2 feet below the present surface. Upon opening one of the graves, a skeleton of upwards of 6 feet was brought to light. There were a number of stone hatchets, beads, and ornaments of peculiar workmanship near the right arm. Several large flint spear and arrowheads among the ribs gave evidence that the warrior had died in battle. In another grave was the skeleton of a man equally large. The right leg had been broken during life, and the bones had grown together. The protuberance at the points of union was as large as an egg, and the limb was bent like a bow. At the feet lay the skull of some enemy or slave. Several pipes and pendants were near the shoulders. In other graves, Cohen made equally interesting finds. It seems that the region was populated by a fairly intelligent people, and that the Serpent's mound was an object of worship. Near the graves is a large field in which broken implements, fragments of pottery, and burned stones give evidence of a prehistoric village. Giants of prehistoric France. The something register, the Olween register, November 8th, 1894. In a prehistoric cemetery recently uncovered in Montpellier, France, while workmen were excavating a waterworks reservoir, human skulls were found measuring 28, 31, and 32 inches in circumference. The bones, which were found with the skulls, were also of gigantic proportions. These relics were sent to the Paris Academy, and a learned savant who lectured on the find says that they belong to a race of men between 10 and 15 feet in height. Something tells me those are going to disappear really quickly. The biggest giant ever known, the world, October 7th, 1895, 9 feet high and probably a Californian Indian. Wait a second. What about all the 20 footers we found and the 15 footers? Okay, fine. 9 feet high, the biggest giant ever known, not even Goliath or Og or whatever. 9 feet high and probably California Indian. We'll give it to this guy. Measurement well authenticated. Other big men and women of fact and fable who are famous types, if giantism. What newspaper is this again? The World. All right. I don't know much about the World. Doesn't give me a lot of description, but whatever. The corpse of the biggest man that ever lived has been dug up near San Diego, California. Hey, that used to be my old backyard. At all events, there is no satisfactory read in ancient or modern history of any human being nearly so. Wait, what? Wait, hold on. At all events, there is no satisfactory read in ancient or modern history of any human being nearly so tall. So apparently these people are saying the Bible is not satisfactory literature. Okay. So this is who you're dealing with here. The mummy, for in such a condition the remains were found, is that of a person who would have, there it is. You guys seen this picture hundreds of times. Who would have been about 9 feet high in life. This makes allowance for the shrinkage, which may be pretty closely calculated. So just to show you guys this is a great photo here. It's been shown a lot. This is a 9-footer. So we're reading a lot about, 8, 9 feet. And it's like, yeah, 8 or 9 feet. That's massive. I mean, that's whoa, that's pretty big. I mean, what was Goliath? Was he 9 feet? Was he 12 feet? Even if it was 9 feet going up against a little boy, that's pretty big. As to the accuracy in the estimate, there can be no question, as the cadaver has been carefully inspected and measured by Professor Thomas Wilson, curator of the Department of Prehistoric Anthropology in the Smithsonian Institution. See, no wonder why they're saying this is the biggest giant ever found, and by other scientists. The tape line even now registers the length from heel to top of the head at 8 feet 4 inches. Okay, so I think that's not even 9 foot. That's 8 foot 4 inches. The mummy is that of an Indian and is almost certainly prehistoric, though its age cannot be determined with any sort of accuracy. Historical records of the part of California where it was found go back for at least 250 years, and they make no mention of any man of gigantic stature. And of course, whatever. Records can be destroyed. How much older the body may be must be left open to conjecture. Its preservation is no matter of surprise. In that arid region, the atmospheric conditions are such that a corpse buried in the dry season might very well become perfectly desiccated before the arrival of the rains and thus be rendered permanently proof against decay. I could buy that. The body was found in a cave by a party of prospectors. Over the head are the remnants of a leather hood. The man was well advanced in years. It has been stated that the man must have surpassed in height any giant of whom there is a historical record. They keep hammering that point out, don't they? This is unquestionably true so far as the last 2 centuries are concerned. I could buy that. And accounts of older dates are not well authenticated. Indeed, they grow more and more apocryphal as distant in time increases. That's actually a pretty astonishing claim there at the end, confession. I really like that last line. Indeed, they grow more and more apocryphal as distance in time increases. Did this thing just bounce forward on me? Okay, I'll give you one more shot at looking at this picture. So you can see this. So 8 foot 4 inches. And I'm taking it that those 2 guys are just average height. 5'8", 5'9". I don't really know what their height is. Is this the ancestor of the American race? You're not supposed to say that anymore either. Because as you know, they came over on a land bridge and there was nobody who came before them whatsoever. Is this, okay, I just read that. Is this the ancestor of the American race? Discovery of an ancient giant's footprint in British Columbia raises an interesting question. The New York Journal, August 23rd, 1896. Dispatches from Victoria, British Columbia announced the discovery of a series of gigantic footprints in that colony. They are apparently made by a human being, and if so, it is prima facie evidence of the existence of a race of prehistoric giants on the Pacific coast. The Sunny Journal has made telegraphic inquiries concerning the discovery and has obtained many additional details. No doubt exists in the minds of those who have seen the impressions that they are of human making, but there is as yet no reliable scientific verdict on the subject. The Provincial History Society has already begun an investigation. In any case, the discovery is one of great interest. It will probably arouse a sharp discussion among archaeologists. If the prints are proved to the satisfaction of the investigators to be those of a living creature, the question will remain to be decided whether it was human or not. Anything concerning the early history of the human race arouses great and natural curiosity. One would like to know whether his prehistoric ancestors were great and terrible creatures or small and ape-like ones. If they were small, how could they have lived almost unarmed among the huge and fierce beasts which then abounded on the earth? If there are pygmies today, compared to whom men of the bigger races are giants, why should there not have lived thousands of years ago giants compared to whom the biggest men today are pygmies? Man, the last comer on the earth, is the animal concerning whose early history least is known. The natural history of some animals can be traced for countless ages, but the bones of man are very perishable and are remarkable if they have an antiquity of 2,000 years. For these and many other reasons, the report from British Columbia deserves all possible attention. The footprints were found on the island of Victoria near the town of Quatsino on the west coast. Their discoverer was John L. Leeson, a storekeeper of the town and a man of intelligence. He reported his find to Captain Foote of the... Wait a second. Wasn't this just a... Wasn't it a foot they found? He reports it, Captain Foote. He reported to Captain Foote of the steamer Mischief, oh boy, who repeated his account to the members of the Provincial History Society. They were satisfied of its interest and importance, and a party was sent out to make an investigation. It appears that Leeson or Liaison was walking at some distance from the town when his curiosity was aroused by a strange depression in a large flat rock that lay before him. So if you ever do see a strange depression that, and of course he was at the time at the foot of the mountain. So if you're ever at the foot of a mountain and you see a strange depression that looks like a giant foot, make sure to call on Captain Foot straight off the streamer Mischief. The depression once suggested a human foot, but it was of enormous size. There was a well-marked hollow where this could, I mean, okay, I'll comment on this when I'm done. There was a well-marked hollow where the heel would have been, and a very faint depression indicated the arch of the foot. The ball of the big toe and the rest of the forward part of the foot were plainly to be seen. It is to be remembered that no other animal has an arched foot like that of man. Liaison immediately proceeded to measure the prints and found that it was 29 inches in length. Its greatest depth was 4 inches. Fascinated by his discovery, he carefully examined the vicinity. At first, he saw nothing which he could connect with the prints, but after a few minutes, he came upon another almost identical. It was 9 feet away from the first. This apparently was the length of the stride which the giant had been in the habit of taking. Following the direction indicated by these 2 prints, Liaison found a number of others. They came to an end abruptly, which was not surprising, for their surroundings must have undergone tremendous changes since they were made. The mountain itself may have come into existence in that time. Not surprising that footprints should have been preserved for so many ages. They may have been made in soft mud, which subsequently hardened and was then burrowed in the earth by volcanic action, and there turned into stone and preserved from injury until another volcanic disturbance brought them to daylight again. A large part of the knowledge of animals of early geological periods has been obtained from imprints left by them in this way. So, I mean, what they're describing here, if what they're describing is what I think they're describing, is, Noah's flood, in which a creature such as a very large man what was his stride again? He said, was it and it was 9 feet. Okay, a stride of 9 feet. So that's pretty massive. I mean, he could have been obviously running, right, if there was water coming at him. Liaison, it is said, has already set to work to chisel out the first footprint which he found. He intends to ensure public recognition as its discoverer. The existence of prehistoric giants on this continent has already been the subject of scientific discussion. The most important and interesting discovery tending to prove their existence was that of the Carson footprints. In 1868, Warden Batterman of the Nevada Penitentiary, while making excavations for the jail in a big bank of clay and metamorphite, came across certain tracks which were said by local scientists to be those of an extinct order of wading fowl. The next discovery was at a level of 16 feet below the surface and consisted of the bones of a mastodon, most of which crumbled to dust on exposure to air, but some of which have been preserved. Next came the uncovering of footprints, about which there was considerably more interest and discussion. All in all, there were hundreds of them in parallel lines and crossing each other, and in shape, though certainly not in size, they looked like the imprints of human feet made in the soft clay many thousands of years earlier in the world's history, and preserved by the superincumbent metamorphite rock. By actual measurement, the impressions were found to range from 8 to 21 inches in length. The news of the uncovering of these gigantic footprints brought all the wise men of the West to Carson. With their advent came a bitter discussion as to the character of the track makers. Professor Lee Kant declared that the tracks were those of the great sloth, an arboreal monster which used to roam the Nevada wilds when they had forest instead of alkali waste and sagebrush. Professor Harkness, on the other hand, was of the opinion that the footprints were those of a tribe of prehistoric men, and that their frequency in this locality showed that the old clay beds must have been a highway for the giants of a Neolithic age. Subsequent discoveries have a decided touch of realism to this hypothesis. As the excavations went on, other and still more gigantic footprints were discovered. These were of the mammoth, whose bones had already been found, and about these mastodonic tracks, those of the human-like character seemed to press. As there had been no discussion concerning the contemporaneous character of the tracks, It would follow, therefore, either that the sloths had held close and numerous companionship with the mammoth, against which there is the burden of natural history proof, or that the stone men of the Nevada plain had been tracking down the gigantic beast to give him battle for food and had come upon their quarry here. The bones, despite their condition of decay, had given a fair idea of the huge bulbs of the mammoth, but these spore furnished an object lesson of bulbs that was even more powerful. The prints were from 29 to 34 inches diameter, the feet of an African elephant measuring from 12 to 16 inches in diameter. And where the great hairy pachyderm had trodden the clay, had risen in ridges a foot high. Here, then, the tree or cavemen with their stone axes or obsidian tipped arrows had brought the mastodon to bay, and it would not need a great flight of the imagination to see the conflict between the men and beast. Nor with the bones in such near neighborhood would it need very much more imagination to see how the battle ended. A strange addition to the actual realism of the scene is furnished by the testimony of the rocks themselves. Somewhat ahead of the massive tracks around the center of the hunting scene are found other prints of the big wading birds before alluded to. These show how the long-legged hunters of the pool first ran swiftly from the scene, and then from the gradual shortening and deepening of the claw marks, how the big birds left the earth and took wing, frightened from the salt marshes where they had been feeding by the rush and yells of the stone men and the trumpeting of the hunted mastodon. Man, when he appeared on the earth, had a great many unpleasant neighbors, and had he been the size indicated by a British Columbian footprint, he would have had plenty of opportunity to exercise his powers in combat. Among the animals then living were the hairy mammoth, which was much larger than the elephant, the woolly rhinoceros, the giant hippopotamus, as well as tigers, hyenas, and bears of great size and ferocity. The climate of the whole world was much colder, for the woolly pachyderms extended as far as the south of France. A remarkable similarity between the weapons and implements of primitive man has been noted all over the world. The stone hammers, axes, and so forth are alike in Europe, Asia, and America. From the remains of men of the Stone Age found in France, it is concluded that they had massive bones, long and flat feet, comparatively short arms and long forearms, with powerful muscles, greatly developed jaws, widely open nostrils, and were of unbridled passions. Professor Broca found the thigh bones in their width approaching those of the highest ape, and a remarkable transverse flattening of the tibia. The ascending branch of the lower jaw was very wide, and the cardial capacity equal to that of high races of the present day. Another archaeologist, M. Lartet, says that the man of the Stone Age lived without fruits, was essentially preduceous and carnivorous, an eater of raw flesh, and a cannibal. Cute, but not true. There is no scientific evidence to disprove the theory that gigantic races of men lived on the earth in the days of its infancy. The traditions of the most ancient of civilized people contain strong testimony that there were such races. And all right. So Dr. Bennion tells how to build a prehistoric giant. So what they're saying is that if these footprints were of a true giant, they're comparing to Chang the Giant right here. And there is Chang the Giant doesn't go up to his waistline. It is easy to reconstruct from the footprint of the prehistoric man his entire form according to the proportions of a modern man. An ordinary man 6 feet high has a foot about 12 inches in length. A man with a foot 29 inches long would be about 2.5 times as tall, or between 17 and 18 feet high. So that's kind of interesting. So if I'm understanding them right, they're saying that this man is Og size, that they're finding an Og. That's very awkward, that the way they make that drawing there. Very awkward. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but looks like he's about to get watered. This I guess this is Chang the Giant. I'm a little confused. This is Chang the Giant, and maybe this guy is not the giant, but he's standing under the hose. To the man 6 feet high, a weight of 200 pounds may be allowed. Well, maybe we can tack on a couple more 100 pounds in today's culture. 2.5 times, that would be 500 pounds. And to this 1/3 for a proportionate increase in all directions. And you have a total of 660 pounds. Just 6 numbers off from the big one. That would be the approximate weight of our prehistoric man. According to the same system of reckoning, he would have a brain weighing 125 ounces. That would give him large thinking powers. He would be about 100 inches around the chest and would have biceps 18 inches in circumference. Corbett and Sullivan would be ridiculous pygmies compared to him. The average man's stride and walking is 2 feet. The prehistoric man would take 5 feet. A very fast professional runner can cover in the neighborhood of a mile in 5 minutes. The giant would perhaps be able to go 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. But many considerations enter into this question. He would have to overcome a great deal of friction. His capacity for eating would be tremendous. He could drink a gallon of wine and eat a whole sheep at a meal. The prehistoric people, however, did not eat as regularly as we do. Why? Everybody should know out there that even modern, even the Neanderthals now, they're basically saying that even whether or not they're human like us is up for debate, right? But they're saying that like these were totally civilized people, very spiritual, very artistic. They weren't, ooga booga, clubbing girls over the head and dragging them by the hair types is, the image that many of us grew up with. Anyways, they ate all they could when they got it. They were great gourmands and very carnivorous. No, they were not. Mighty eaters of flesh and fish. And this giant have needed 10 pounds of meat in a day. Now, I will correct this. If anyone out there has read the Lost Book of King Og, which I have to warn you is one of the most awful books ever. Blasphemous, I should say. One of the most blasphemous books ever. But it is purported to come from King Og. And however you slice it, it is a very ancient book. It was talked about, I think, in the 1st century or the whereabouts. And then, they talked about it being blasphemous back then. But, King Og in there talks all the time about eating the little people. So I can go with carnivorous in that sense, coming from the Rephaim. If he understood the art of brewing, he would have been able to drink a keg of beer. If he were as powerful as Sandow in proportions to his size, he could have carried a bowl under each arm. And there's, I think, stories about that, right? The Native Americans talk about the giants who could carry the bison in each arm. He could have broken in any modern doorway, and it would have required 6 or 7 of the strongest and most courageous policemen to arrest him. The thing is about this story is that I don't feel like they're taking this seriously. I feel like they're kind of just like, trying to get reads out there from an audience, but they don't actually believe what they're advocating. I get that sense. It is perhaps idle to base speculations on his strength on that of a modern man. It would probably be far greater in proportion to his size. The chimpanzee, which is somewhat smaller than a man, can twist a gun barrel with its hands and is stronger than 2 or 3 men. It is reasonable to suppose that a prehistoric man who lived almost as a wild animal would have a strength proportionate to that of an ape. In that case, the giant would have had a truly fearful strength. It is curious to note that legends of races of giants have been more or less accepted in all ages until, of course, the last 200 years, when everybody suddenly knows better. In the Bible are mentioned the Anakemites, the last of whom, Og, the king of Bashan, was slain by Moses. Then there were the Cyclops of Greek mythology. Dr. Schliemann has discovered remains of gigantic buildings which lead him to believe in the actual existence of a Cyclopean race. Now I got to look into that. Have you guys ever looked into that before? Let me say this again. Dr. Schliemann has discovered remains of gigantic buildings which lead him to believe in the actual existence of a Cyclopean race. S.A. Binion, Ph.D. Giant skeletons found. Kentucky Public Ledger, May 31st, 1897. 10 skeletons were found in 2 mounds by Dr. Loveberry, curator of the Ohio State University Museum. One that of a giant fully 8 feet tall. It is the most notable find yet. Hundreds of mounds, embalmed 9-foot giants, and dams. Syracuse Daily Standard, July 23rd, 1897. While men were excavating with a steam shovel near Mora, Minnesota, they found an old copper spear with a point measuring 10 inches in length and tapering to a very fine and tempered point. The weapon shows the maker to have been an adept in working copper metal. Archaeologists believe that at some prehistoric time, the country surrounding Mora was densely inhabited by a race of people who were much further advanced in civilization than the Indians. That's really interesting. Again, you can't say that anymore in any newspaper, but that is truly interesting. And I think most of my viewers are on board with the idea. I mean, a lot of people talk about Tartarian society, but definitely on board with the idea that there was a civilization here in North America that was actually far advanced than certainly what we're told. The many mounds around Fish Lake show that a mighty race of people lies slumbering there, whose history is as yet unwritten. From the mounds of earth, which were used as sepulchres for their dead, or I guess sepulchres, and which demonstrate beyond a doubt that they were a numerous as well as powerful people. Bones of giant Indians found in Maryland, prehistoric men 7 feet tall who once lived in what is Maryland, Baltimore, American, November 15th, 1897. There has just been received at the Maryland Academy of Sciences the skeleton of an Indian 7 feet tall. It was discovered near Antietam. There are now skeletons of 3 powerful Indians at the Academy who at one time in the wilderness roamed over the state of Maryland, armed with such instruments as nature gave them or that their limited skill taught them to make. 2 of these skeletons belong to individuals evidently of gigantic size. The vertebrae and bones of their legs are nearly as thick as those of a horse, and the length of the long bones exceptional. The skulls are of fine proportions, ample and with walls of moderate thickness and of great strength, and stiffened beyond with a powerful ridge, occipital ridge. The curves of the forehead are moderate and not retreating, suggesting intelligence and connected with jaws of moderate development. The locality from which these skeletons came is in Frederick County near Antietam Creek. It was formerly supposed to have been the battleground of 2 tribes of Indians, the Catawbas and the Delawares. Before the coming of the white man, this site was occupied as a village by Indians of great stature, some of them 6.5 to 7 feet in height. How are we doing on time? How's everybody doing? I think I'll read 1 or 2 more, and then we'll end it for the night. And that should give us good. Yeah, that should be good to actually. I'll go a couple more pages, and then we'll finish it on the next session. Wisconsin mound opened. Skeleton found of a man over 9 feet high with an enormous skull. The New York Times, December 20th, 1897. Maple. See, it's getting late, right? And I'm like, can't even pronounce Maple right. Maple Creek, Wisconsin, December 19th. One of the 3 recently discovered mounds in this town has been opened. In it was found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size. The bones measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in a fair state of preservation. The skull was as large as a half-bushel measure. Some finely tempered rods of copper and other relics were lying near the bones. The mound from which these relics were taken is 10 feet height and 30 feet long and varies from 6 to 8 feet in width. The 2 mounds of lesser size will be excavated soon. Giant 8 feet, 7 inches tall, unearthed, Ohio Science Annual, 1898. A rare archaeological discovery has been made near Reinersville in Morgan County, Ohio. A small knoll which had always been supposed to be the result of an uprooted tree, was opened recently and discovered to be the work of mound builders. Just below the surrounding surface, a layer of boulders and pebbles was found. Directly underneath this was found the skeleton of a giant 8 feet 7 inches in height. Surrounding the skeleton were bone and stone implements, stone hatchets, and other characteristics of the mound builders. The discovery is considered by the scientists as one of the most important ever made in Ohio. The skeleton is now in the possession of a Rainersville collector. All right, I think that's going to be a good place to end it there. Let me know how this went tonight, guys. Like I said, starting out, I'm doing a broadcast over 3 different social networks. I'm doing YouTube, doing Facebook, and of course, Discord live. And hopefully the Wi-Fi streaming was good for everybody. Hopefully I'm not choppy or robotic or anything like that. And hopefully I can do this more in the future. So just, reminder to everyone out there, every single Friday, I go through my Torah portions. We're almost through the book of Deuteronomy, within 2 or 3 more weeks. And then we're going to roll back. When I roll it back, I'm not going to be doing Torah portions. I'm just going to be going through the Bible. I'm just going to start in Genesis. We're going to do a chapter a week, maybe half a chapter a week. I don't know. We're going to take as long as we need to go in depth into this. And I'm looking forward to that. So please do come by, join every Friday night as we go through our Bible studies. And I'll be starting Song of Songs soon as well. And love you guys. We'll do this again. Good night, everybody.